So in 2023, we decided to form an alumni association and keep working towards the issue pertinent to public health and to society as large. And bringing on discussion on public universities this evening is one of the steps in that direction. And this is our first webinar, and we will be holding webinar once in 2 to 3 months on various issues that concern all of us. And I will be very happy if you all of us will join us in that. And we will be posting a Google Doc in the chat box. So whoever is not in our list, feel free to please fill it up so we can connect you in future. Just to give you a context about today's talk, the public university has long stood as a space of democratization within an otherwise segregated Indian society. It has played a pivotal role in extending educational opportunities to individuals from marginalized social and economic backgrounds. However, the recent developments indicate a systematic attack on these public education institutions, an attack that demands careful attention and critical discussion. Institutional shift, regulatory pressure, and the shrinking of intellectual and dissenting spaces have collectively undermined the democratic imagination of higher education. Universities, once envisaged as sanctuaries of free thoughts and inquiry, now face challenges that threaten their very essence. These include curbs on freedom of speech, restriction on academic freedom, and the increasing introduction of self-finance courses. The current movement therefore calls for a deep reflection on the relevance, challenges, and future of public universities in India. And this, in today's webinar, we seek to collectively deliberate on how these institutions can reclaim their democratic and transformative potential. And I'm very grateful and for this opportunity to introduce our speaker today. And I request them if they can switch on their video, that would be wonderful to see their faces also. First, we have with us Lara Jesani, who's a dear friend and a very fine advocate. She is an independent litigator in Bombay High Court and National Green Tribunal. She advocates for human, environmental, and land rights. She is actively involved with the People's Union for Civil Liberties (PUCL) and contributes to various feminist and social justice collectives. And we have with us this evening Professor Satish Deshpande, who do not need an introduction among many of us. He has done extensive work on caste and class inequalities in contemporary social theory, politics and history of social sciences, and South-South interaction. He has taught sociology and in Delhi School of Economics, from where he retired 2 years ago, and is currently Professor M.N. Srinivas Chair at Institute of Social and Economic Change. He has authored multiple books, which includes Contemporary India, Sociological View, Untouchability in Rural India, co-edited The Problem of Caste, co-edited Anthropology in the East. So the enormous list of publication, and he has been a person whose work on higher education has been very significant for me also during my PhD, which is also a study on higher education. So we are looking forward for learning and understanding the current context and current issues from both of them. And just a very quick announcement that are required to do any webinar. Please keep yourself mute. If you keep your cameras on, that would be wonderful for the speaker and all of us. And if there is any question that comes into your mind when speakers are speaking, please post them into the chat box. We will take the question and answer after our speakers have spoken. And Google Doc I have already shared with you. So I would like to request Lara to go first and share with us her thoughts and her inputs. So Lara, hand over to you. You will have about 20 minutes and then we'll go to Professor Satish Deshpande. So hand over to you.
Thank you, Renu. And thank you, everyone, and also the Alumni Association for inviting me. Like Renu introduced, I will be speaking about the situation of public universities, and my perspective is going to be more from the position of an activist and lawyer who has been working for academic freedom. But I think the issues we're discussing are really new to anyone, really, because what is happening with the public universities is something that is not just a decade-old phenomena, but it has been now, first it was the state universities that were under attack, and then we saw in the last decade it was the universities that have been under. One of the biggest, I think, factors in the way in which we have seen a loss of public funding in education, or a loss of the public university space that was available to many of us, like for instance it was available to me, is something that has come with the wave of privatization. So one of the biggest, I think, challenges that we have seen happen, and this is like I said, not a decade old, but a challenge that we saw the state universities and allied colleges first face, and then slowly it moving on to the central universities. And in order to succeed in this phenomena of privatization, we also saw a lot of attacks on the student community as well as on scholars in general, in order to quell their voices of protest against the increasing privatization, the self-financing model, which has been steadily introduced. Now, just to go back a little bit, in 2017, People's Commission on Shrinking Democratic Spaces had actually held a tribunal in light of the several cases that had come up from universities. And I wanted to start with that a little bit in order to talk about the kind of issues that emerged during that tribunal, as well as the kind of conversations that have gone on in civil society pursuant to that. But along with the JNU case, where we had seen the sedition case being filed against Anirban and Umar Khalid and Kanhaiya Kumar and others, we had also seen a spate of attacks on other universities like the Punjab University, the Hyderabad Central University with the Rohit Vemula case, also the Aligarh Muslim University, the Allahabad University, Banaras University. So many of these colleges had been under attack at that point of time. Mainly, these attacks were targeted at students who were protesting against fee hike, or who were raising political issues, considering the saffronization of education that was underway, or the attacks on different citizens and people's rights. So the amount of criminalization and attacks at that point of time had increased under the BJP government. And looking at how the student defenders were under attack, civil society organizations came together, and the People's Commission for Shrinking Democratic Spaces, which was a collective consisting of several civil society organizations, held a tribunal in Delhi. And before that, this happened in April 2018, but before that, for about a year and a half, there were visits that were made at different universities in order to find out what's the situation in each of these universities, and also to record testimonies of students who then came and presented at the tribunal in April 2018. And the following year, in 2019, a report was released called Indian Campuses Under Siege. The copy should be available online, but otherwise I can also share it. The report was also translated into Hindi. Many of us were involved in the exercise. I was also part of that exercise. And, as a process of that, through the report, some important issues were brought out. Through documents, testimonies, experiences that were shared by both teachers as well as by students across the country. And more than 130 testimonies, in fact, came to be finally published in the report. And about 40 or so or more, I think probably 50 of them presented at the tribunal. And some of the major themes that came out was, number one, the privatization and what was happening because of the privatization. That is the increasing number of self-financing courses, the withdrawal of financial aid, to students, especially students coming from the SC, ST, and OBC communities. There was also the issue of fee hikes, and we'd seen fee hikes happening across campuses, and many students were, in fact, and many unions were protesting against the fee hikes. Also, the withdrawal of scholarships. So many of the scholarship schemes that were available were being steadily withdrawn, fellowships were being withdrawn, or they were not being disbursed in time, leading to students having to drop out. So many of these issues were actually a part of the, the all result of the privatization. Many of the universities which were being taken over by, private players. Private players were also entering the education field in a very big way. So all of these issues came under the privatization. Second was structural marginalization. Now, structural marginalization on account of identity. So we had, issues of gender, sexuality. We had issues of, communal discrimination or religious discrimination that was taking place within campuses, especially with students, from Kashmir or Muslim students, because of the increasing saffronization and the increasing, communalism generally also politically in the country. Discrimination of SC/ST students, and this is across several of the campuses. We've seen that in the Indian Institute of Technology. We've seen that in most of the public universities and also in the private universities. So many of these issues were brought in. Then there was also the issue of saffronization of education. Again, a really big thing on how the texts were being, how the syllabus was being altered. And in order to fulfill this political agenda, the various kinds of changes that were being brought in, which was leading to a completely different or a completely revamped, ideologically oriented sort of a shift that was taking place within the education system itself. Also, the attacks on free speech and the loss of, the space to protest within the campuses. Now, in that, of course, not being allowed to do screenings, not being allowed to hold any kinds of meetings, the backlash that you would have at the time of protest, we have seen that now go to another level. Where institutes are coming out with policies which are aimed against students who would want to protest or who would want to bring in speakers, or associations or groups who would want to hold events within campuses. We're seeing that happen with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. We're seeing that happen with IIT. IIT has come out with a media policy. We have also seen that happen, in the public university spaces where, many, and public university spaces has been happening, quite openly. There are very few campuses which have been spared, which are the campuses which are more politically active and the student unions are strong. But otherwise, if we see across public universities, we're seeing it also happen, where meeting halls are not being given. There are different kinds of, in fact, there are certain student associations or groups who are given, the space to hold meetings. And we are seeing meetings being held on Ayurveda, meeting being held on, the importance of cow urine. But at the same time, the meetings which are, on any kind of human rights or on any kind of human rights issues taking place across the campuses, those are permissions. So this loss of space, also loss of space to protest with the kind of policies that have been brought in by the institute, and also the actions which have been initiated by the institute in order to injunct protests. So many of these issues that are common across the country. And then, of course, the criminalization of protests and the kind of attacks on student associations and student organizations. Now, under the criminalization of protests, we've seen across campuses that institutes have been filing cases against students and also instigating the filing of FIRs. Campuses have been opened up to police. The police have come in. We've also seen campuses where we saw the attack that took place in JNU in early 2020, where non-state actors, people from right-wing organizations were allowed to enter the campus and attack students, but no action was taken against them. Yet at the same time, we are seeing that those students who are indulging in protests within campuses or raising issues within campuses are being, there have been, suspensions that have been effected through disciplinary action. We've seen that they have been removed from hostel. We've seen that they have been, FIRs that have been filed against them. Even if they're protesting outside campus on political issues, that has resulted in action within campuses. So this kind of criminalization of students and student protests. And then finally, like I said, the attack on student organizations. Anyways, there was institute policy not to allow registration of student groups and student associations. We saw that happen with the APPSC. We saw that happen with APSC. Many of the organizations, student organizations on the left, were not recognized by the universities. At the same time, we have also seen that there have been, actions that have been taken against student associations. Either for announcing protests or meetings, they have been banned in whatever effect and way by institutes, and this is again, difficult in students collectively organizing or mobilizing for any of these issues. So here's some of the themes in which the tribunal actually inquired, and there was a jury team of about 3 retired judges and several other jury members were part of this jury panel, 12 jury members in total, who then came up with recommendations, and a report was released. Now, in the process, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is that in the process of this entire exercise, one thing that was felt was that this is a trend. It is not just happening in an isolated manner in one university or the other university, but it is a trend which is reaching all of the universities. We're also seeing that there has been a active, an active role that the state has been playing. It's something that they have decided that they will do in criminalizing students, and by criminalizing students, creating a chilling effect within campuses so that there is no protest, so that there is no challenge to any of their diktats. So this was the trends that was observed through the tribunal. What was also seen was that there has been an increasing discrimination that has been taking place within campuses. This is based on identity or also on the basis of politics of the various students or the student groups. So this discrimination was also recorded within the campuses. Now, shifting for a minute now to what I wanted to talk about in terms of the observations that I feel are important that I should share. And I, as a lawyer, one of the things that I have seen that has kind of perplexed me is the way in which the space within the campus has not only been shrinking, but it has literally the entire demography of the students is changing, and this is happening through the various policies that have been brought in. In 2017. And I'll just talk about one of the cases that, in fact, I was representing the students was of Tata Institute of Social Sciences. In 2017, the students had come together collectively in order to protest. The student union had come together and other groups had come together within TISS to protest on the withdrawal of financial aid within campuses. I'm talking about the Bombay campus here, which was protesting against the withdrawal of financial aid that had been offered to GOI PMS students. Now, the GOI PMS, students were basically for SC, ST, and OBC students. As far as OBC students, the financial aid had already been withdrawn, which had actually it had affected the admission of OBC students. It had dropped by 50% in the following year of the withdrawal. And then when they tried to effect it, the SC students, the student community came together, they protested against it, and they had what is known as a GOI PMS protest. And in this protest, they demanded that the financial aid which was being withdrawn and the steps that the Tata Trust was taking in order to withdraw these financial aid to students must be taken back. Now, during the course of this protest, a lot of students, agitated. This protest went on for a couple of months, and finally, TISS filed a suit against students who they felt were leading the protest. They filed it against selectively 5 students and they, in order to get an injunction against them from protesting. Now, initially, when the students went into court, I was not representing them, but at that point of time when they went into court, the court actually granted an injunction. And later on, however, at the final hearing, by the time they had representation and they filed their pleading, the injunction was revoked. But one of the things that happened in the course of this was that the student committee, which was quite united, they were together. They were first and foremost, dissuaded from protesting. And at the time when the injunction continued, obviously, this led to a huge, sort of a lull in protest within the campuses. Of course, on other issues, the protests continued. But as far as the GOPMS, scholarship issue was concerned, the protests, of course, met a natural death eventually. But another very important thing that, which I feel happened in the course of all of this is that many students withdrew from the protest culture. And this is one of the things that I feel is a very big impact of what is happening, is the chilling effect that it is causing within campuses. And this also gives the universities or the management a kind of a right to, then bring in the kind of policies that they want to. Now, of course, I'm not talking about a public university. I'm talking about a private university. Tata Institute of Social Sciences is an aided, it is a UGC-funded university, but at the same time, it is a private university. But we are seeing the same kind of thing also happen in, IIT over here. We are seeing the same kind of thing also happen in Bombay University, in IIT as well. Students who were at the lead protests have suspension notices. Some of their cases I was doing very recently. There was a student whose case I was representing, who's from IIT, a PhD scholar from the Bombay campus. And we went to the Bombay High Court in order to challenge his suspension. His suspension was mainly because he said that all festivals are celebrated in IIT campus. This was the sentence that he had made to the media. And or they claimed that he had made it to the media. He had in fact not given the media permission to publish this statement. He did not know that any kind of article was coming. But it was for this statement that he was suspended. And then, of course, the High Court, High Court allowed him to resume his studies. Suspension was taken back. But at the same time, what this is actually causing is quietening of students, silencing of any kind of dissent. The statement that he had made was in the context of, the IIT canteen coming up with a policy on food habits and on celebration of celebration of Eid or Ramzan festival. And this was the kind of reaction that was, that the management actually brought in for a statement that otherwise says that the institute is actually secular and is plural. So we are seeing that the idea here is not just those particular incidents and instances, but for the most basic and the most, innocuous statements and innocuous, causes, the institute is willing to go to court or is willing to, go ahead and, kind of impose disciplinary action in order to stop the students from, either interacting with the media or holding protests or holding any kind of meetings or inviting particular speakers who are from another political mindset or allowing any kind of, activity within the campus that according to them, is against the government or does not suit their own ideology. So this is a phenomena that we see that is happening across different universities and institutes. It's happening to the private universities, it's happening to the public universities. But the critical part is that the way in which it is happening to the public universities is also in order to bring in this, the privatized model of education. We also saw that through the new education policy that came in. The new education policy and all those who were protesting against the new education policy for the kind of changes it was bringing in order to allow private players or allow their own ideology to flourish. Okay, those protests have also been stopped in the same manner. Another student, if we see, whose case I was representing, had in fact been suspended for being part of a protest against the new education policy in Delhi. And the student is from Bombay. And he had not done this protest within campus. There was absolutely no connection with the university, but just for participating in a protest that took place at Jantar Mantar in Delhi, okay, which had police permission, which had absolutely, he was called an anti-national in the press release of the institute. So we are seeing these kinds of instances increasing. And this is where I feel one of the things that I feel that, has changed. I think earlier there was some kind of a pushback against this. We've seen, I always feel very disappointed about this when I say that the first, I think, it's different in Delhi. It's different in some of the public universities like JNU or DU, where teachers and professors actually have been standing with the students, or there has been a history of that happening. But in many of the private universities, when we see, there is absolutely no support which comes from the teacher community. They are not even standing with the students when they have these kinds of criminal actions taking place against them. They are not really, speaking up because they are so worried about losing their jobs, because most of them have been put on contracts, or because otherwise, they have a very comfortable, position within the campus and they do not want to take a stand. It can be any of these. We saw that even happen during the tribunal. During the tribunal, none of the professors are actually willing to come and testify, especially those who came from the private campuses. The only few professors who actually came and gave their testimonies or who spoke as experts at the tribunal were from public universities. At least they were willing to stick their neck out. Again, the kind of policies that have been brought in, okay, which is this whole wave of privatization, this whole wave of removal of benefits for or entitlements for teachers, the whole model of bringing in contract based work has also led to a silencing of the teachers. And today we have a whole batch of teachers. Today, all of those who are going to pass out will not get pension benefits. Now, this is again going to lead to a further silencing of the scholars across the country. So these challenges that we're seeing, that even the space which was there for back has actually shrunk. And this is happening not just from the student community who are already at risk, who are already under threat. Many of the students that I have observed, and I don't mean to be generalizing, but still that most of the students who have been at the forefront of these protests are also those who come from marginalized communities who are themselves vulnerable. And then they face these additional attacks from the universities. And they do not have the support system or the wherewithal in order to deal with these attacks. And they're also easier targets for the university. And so the university has also been selectively targeting Muslim students, have been selectively targeting Dalit students, Adivasi students. And the pushback has been decreasing because of the amount of attacks that have taken place and the chilling effect that it has caused within campuses. So I feel all of these issues are quite intertwined, and it is a time to kind of collectively look at how one can regroup, how one can push back. And I must also point out that I believe that today, amongst all activists, amongst all defenders, the student defenders are the strongest. And they have been the most vocal, whether it is the farmers issue, whether it is the CAA, whether it is, any kind of economic policy, whether it is the labor reforms. We've seen the student community always stick their neck out, no matter what the cause. But they are also more and more vulnerable today. the public university space has become extremely difficult to navigate, and it has also been completely taken over. The political appointments that started, and we saw an entire era of political appointments happen, whether it is JNU as a campus that was taken over through political appointments, or we've seen that happen with many other campuses across the country. Uh, there was a systematic attempt to take over campuses by bringing in their own people. And this is something that the government has very, very systematically done. And because of this, the spaces within the campuses have not only shrunk, but it has led to a huge amount of surveillance within campuses that has restricted any kind of movement or any kind of speech within the campuses. There are some campuses that still stand strong, but there are many who have been under this attack, and you see their voices actually silenced. And what can the student community do in order to resist it? I think that's a question that that's a question that we have to collectively look at answering. But what can also the civil society do in order to support the student community more and more today? Finally, I also want to just point out that many a time students, when they are under attack, they do not receive the kind of support that they need to, whether it is in terms of legal aid or whether it is any kind of financial support. And there is no network, there is no there is no structure that we have actually put in place in order to support the student defenders who are being targeted and who are facing the brunt of the dispensation, facing the brunt of the management attacks. And this is a lacuna, I feel, that we need to address very, very quickly. In cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, to some extent Hyderabad, or in some of the metropolitan cities in Kolkata, there might be lawyers, there might be activists who come out and support students. But the more you go towards the districts, even in states like Gujarat, I have had many requests that have come from Gujarat, where there have been cases against students or disciplinary action against students, and they are unable to find lawyers or they are unable to find legal support. Activists or organizations very recently, earlier this year and last year, when there were attacks on certain students, PUCL unit in Gujarat had also come forward and supported some of the students. But there have been many other instances where there have been attacks on students in certain universities, either because they were part of a protest or because they organized a meeting or they raised an issue. And the civil society as well as the legal community is not really available to them in order to support them in this moment of crisis. So I think it's very important to also create some kind of a database or a network where we can address some of these issues, because these are very immediate concerns that students face. And without that supportive network, students will not feel confident to raise their voices, and most importantly, we will be leaving student defenders at complete risk. So these are some, I think, very major concerns. These are actionable issues that we really need to look into. But the deterioration of the public university space and the public education system is something that needs to be fought through movement. It has to happen through collectively organizing, and it's not just the responsibility of the student community or the scholar community. It's a responsibility of us all. And how do we look at making this movement? How do we look at making this a citizens issue? How do we bring these issues out in the public using social media, using the media, talking about it, writing about it, having more and more organizations onboarded, and not necessarily only those who are working in the education space, but this is an issue which is a public issue, and there are the future generations are going to find it even more difficult to access the public education system. I studied entirely in the public education system, and I know that I had many things available to me which were not available to me earlier, whether it is in the form of we had, for instance, free education until our 12th. We had subsidized education in our higher education space. These things are no longer available to students anymore, as more and more self-finance courses are being brought in. So we have to make this an issue that the citizens can identify with and join in the asks that we are asking for. So I think some of these things I'm sure Satish will also be raising. I have been asked to wrap up, so I'll stop here. But I'll be around, so let us probably talk about this if we get the time.
So sorry, Lara, because we will have to watch the time also. But wonderful. I think Lara very nicely has put it, the issues in front of us. And sometimes when we are into our own university, we think that it's an isolated issue. But then she wonderfully brought out that it's not an isolated issue. It's something that is going on across the countries, whether in big cities or in small cities. And she very clearly brought out the importance of forming solidarities, creating networks, and what has been the concern so far and how we can go about it. So thank you, Lara, and we will definitely discuss more once Satish finishes the talk. I would like to request Satish ji.
Hello.
So, yeah, hand over to you. Thank you.
And thank you very much for this invitation. And let me start with a small correction. I was described as being affiliated to ISEC. That is not actually true. And I was initially a little bit sort of, amused that the word independent attaches to both the other speakers, but not to me. But currently, I am also just as independent, in the sense that, as we know, one of the meanings of autonomy and independence means the lack of institutional support. So in that sense, I am also free, autonomous. Just a correction, because these things sometimes get very...
No, definitely. I used it in the last talk also. So I will correct.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Technically, my term is over. So
okay, I have no idea.
yeah,
So
that
sorry.
is the...
But I'll
yeah. We never thought about these things before, but particularly since thinking of all the things that Lara has been talking about, suddenly a whole set of things that we never thought of before, we are being forced to think about. So I have something very different in mind, and I'm hoping that it will work well in conjunction with what Lara has been speaking about. And as Lara herself said, that she is talking about immediate issues. And as a working advocate taking up these cases, obviously she has to deal with these immediate issues, and there are a whole host of them. I have been away from the university space in the sense of, in a continuous sense, for the last 2 years after my retirement. And that is both an advantage and a disadvantage. And I'm very aware of that. I'm trying to make the best of this, the advantageous part of my distance, so to speak, from the day-to-day happenings today, to step back from our immediate issues, to step back even from the question of public versus private universities, to talk about universities as such, to step back from the present to a larger arc of history, and to step back from India to a more global perspective on higher education. Higher education happens to be the area of my research as well. And it's one of the handicaps and peculiarities of this field, that most of the research on higher education is done from within higher education. And that is a problem because we are often perhaps unable to see things as clearly as we might if we had more distance. So stepping back, I want to remind ourselves of what a miraculous and, frankly, impossible model the modern university is. The idea of the modern university, the modern Western university, as it has come down to us in modern times over the last, say, 200 years, from initially European origins. Cardinal Newman and Humboldt are the two main protagonists who invented this idea from Europe, and then we have the American versions later. It's an impossible model because it requires funding from the state, and it also requires the freedom to critique the state. In other words, it demands the right to bite the hand that feeds it. And this is clearly something very, very contradictory. The modern university has been simultaneously the means for the transformation of social orders and the upsetting, the changing of hierarchies, social hierarchies, and also simultaneously the means by which the status quo can be maintained in an era where credentials come to count for more and more, and an influential section of the upper middle and basically the affluent classes acquires forms of property that cannot be transmitted in the usual way by simply writing a will or just gifting somebody land or a house or whatever. A surgeon cannot do that to his daughter or son, and therefore must pass through the medium of the higher education system. A third contradictory feature, is that at least ever since the idea of the German research university was taken up and expanded and combined with the idea of liberal education that originated in Britain, in America, these two ideas were combined into what we see now as the most powerful universities in the world. They are required to be elite in intellectual terms, at the same time democratic in terms of access, ideally. Right? Ideally, they're supposed to be allow for a wide range of people to access them, and at the same time, they are supposed to maintain high standards. Again, this is not as easy as it sounds. So this is sort of what I mean by an impossible model, right? And yet it has been there. It has survived for so long. So we need to ask, what is it that precipitates crises in this larger model? And thinking in global terms, we can, and not going back too far into history, we can identify two what look like on the surface, broadly similar points of crisis, moments of crisis. The decade of the 1960s and 70s, and now our current period of in the 2010s and 2020s now. There seems to be turning points in this larger arc of the modern university, which has been fulfilling these contradictory functions in more or less a viable manner in a very wide variety of contexts. So if we look at the 1960s and 70s, when it's very, very well known that there were student revolutions across the world. And this is a phenomenon that perhaps needs more study than has been given to it. From very, very different contexts. China, the Cultural Revolution, whatever the controversies that now surround it, was led by students. In all over Europe, in the United States, and also, lest we forget, also in India. Both the Naxalite movement and the JP movement date from this time, and both were very centrally associated with universities. But the peculiar fact in the larger historical sense about these university originating movements was that they did, in retrospect, they did very little to change the university itself. If you think about the student revolutions of 1968 and all the big names that are associated with it, and whatever they may have done in fields other than education, The university itself very soon went back to, after the radical occupations and so on that happened, went back to business as usual, more or less, right? And so was the case with India as well. If you think about it, what did the JP movement do, or what did the Naxalite movement do to our universities as such? Not much, actually, if you think about it. I mean, there were radical students there. It was a context where radical ideas developed, but the institution itself remained largely sort of unchanged. So these moments of crisis, according to people who have worked on this, arrive when a larger underlying consensus, or a consensus is too strong a word, some kind of a shared doxa. Now, doxa is a term that is used by Pierre Bourdieu to talk about the ground that both the heterodox as well as the orthodox sort of share, without explicitly making that clear, or without being explicitly conscious of it. It's because of this large underlying shared commonality that this impossible model works. I invite you to think about that, especially those of you who are from GNU will remember this image that has been made famous of the emergency years, immediately after the emergency, when the president of the then president of the JNUSU is reading out a list of charges against the prime minister, no less. And the prime minister is standing and watching him with an amused expression on her face. We all know that would be, I can't think of a word stronger than impossible, but that would simply is unthinkable today, right? Similarly, when I think back, less spectacular sort of instances, in 1977, I was in an undergraduate at that time, and some of us were campaigning for the 77 elections. When the elections were announced in January, we started, a group of us were campaigning. Meetings of what later became the Janata Party, the campaign committees for that, some of the campaign committees used to be held in my college, in the home of one of our teachers. Can you imagine that happening today? This was known to the principal of the college, and yet people were saying the fact that some of us were campaigning was known. Teachers would individually stop us and advise us to whatever sort of, not exams are very close, don't waste your time, etc., etc. They would try to give well-meaning advice, but nobody tried to actually stop us. Nobody expelled us. There was no disciplinary action. When the Baroda dynamite case accused were released, they stayed with us in our hostel for 3 days before they could find railway reservations to go to their various places. So when we look back at this, why was this possible then? And why is it not possible today? We need to flip the question really and think about what is it that made it possible for Indira Gandhi to listen to this young man, accusing her of a whole host of things by name in public. So the point I'm trying to make is that all our actions or critique of the state, all our protests were nevertheless assured, in practice, assured the protection of the state. Yes, the emergency was an exception. Yes, many students were picked up, but nothing on the scale on which things are happening today. So in other words, some kind of a doxa is shared during a particular period, and it breaks down for whatever reasons that often have nothing to do with the university itself. And then this impossible model breaks down because it was impossible to begin with, and it was being allowed. Now, India, you might think we are too close to India. We are sort of inside it, and we can't really think clearly about it. Perhaps we are too involved. Think about the United States over the past 6 or 7 months. Who would have thought that the biggest icons of this great Western institution called the liberal university would come crashing down in a matter of 3 months. That's all it took, 3 months for Columbia, for Harvard to come under attack, so many other lesser known institutions under attack, so many academics either thrown out, deported, students, everything that was thought to be not possible. In fact, the elite American university, I personally argued this, I've argued this in print, was the closest thing that we had to a liberated zone. It was the closest thing to a global village. Yes, it was in the United States, but there, in this space, there were people from all over the world. There were people of all kinds of ideologies, and it was all possible under the umbrella of this great institution called the American Liberal University, the elite ones. I must also make a distinction there. Now, how can that come crashing down? This 200-year-old history come crashing down in such a short time? Again, because something in the underlying doxa has got broken. So what I have been trying to point to is that if you take a broader view of things, we need to reverse the question. We need to ask, why does what is happening today, all the things that Lara was talking about, why did they not happen before? Because clearly it is possible for them to happen. Clearly there exist administrations, there exist governments and so on that are willing and able to act in this manner, just as the US government today is willing and able to act in a manner that was unthinkable a little while ago. So when thinking of that, we need to therefore take a step back from our immediate concerns and try and think of what has been happening and what could perhaps begin to explain this breakdown of something shared, which allowed for protest despite the existence of financial control. So I want to just quickly point to a few main issues that I think are relevant, and then I will stop, and most of the discussion can take place through question and answer. First of all, I would like to talk about the threats to the traditional university model. We have to remember that the threats don't come from governments alone. One of the major kind of turning points in recent times was the COVID pandemic, and the lockdown, which brought to the fore the powerful possibilities of a technologically leveraged shift in the type of university model. There has been explicit talk of platforms like Google or Amazon forming partnerships with major academic brand names like Oxford or Harvard and so on, to launch an entirely new type of university based on distance learning, based on MOOCs or whatever, based on technology, a new business model entirely. And the real possibilities of this are very much close to us, and we are feeling this already. I think in the Indian university system, over the last at least 10, 12 years, there has been a gradual attempt to bring this technology to bear by maintaining a recording of a library of recordings and so on. So this is not going to go away. So we need to think about this, what this might mean and what we might be, how we might respond to this. Secondly, everybody knows about the shifts in the world economy that have taken place as a result of 3-4 decades of neoliberal policies across the world, not just, and this is something that the entire globe shares. Even China is not an exception. What I want to point out is that we have moved from an economy where the traditional economy, traditional capitalist economy that Marx spoke of, where the reason why Marx praised capital so much in the first few pages of the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels, I should say, was because he thought that capitalism was a world historic system which was forced to carry the working class along with it. That in order to accumulate, the process of accumulation required capital to do things that it did not necessarily want to, which were progressive things. And this is the sense in which, compared to feudalism or pre-capitalist forms, capitalism was considered progressive. Now that sort of view of the capitalist economy appears to have broken down comprehensively. After the financialization of the economy and the emergence of modes of accumulation, which are delinked from job creation, or at least from the creation of decent jobs, what the ILO calls decent jobs. So jobs are being created, but they are precarious jobs, extremely precarious jobs, very, indecent jobs, if you like. So the two big, at the same time, yet another issue, there is now a widespread hostility to liberal ideas. The idea of a liberal education where you became broad-minded, less of a, Koop Manduk, sort of ethnocentric person, that idea has lost its attraction. Now, higher educational institutions, again, this is not only India, are expected to cement the prejudices of the dominant, whoever is, dominant groups in society. And this is seen as the legitimate function of higher education. So the two big answers to the question, what is higher education good for? One was jobs, crudely put, jobs. The second was liberal ideas or an enlightened citizenry. Both these answers are broken today. And these are broken not because of X government in A country or Y government in B country and so on. They are broken at a global level. In short, what I'm trying to say is that the model of the university to which we have been accustomed is facing a much larger crisis today than simply one of incompatible or, one of a particular regime that is against various things that and making things, doing things that were not done before. So how do we respond, or what should we do? One of the disadvantages of stepping back is that it becomes difficult to think of immediate things to do, of offering solutions, so to speak. I want us to think carefully again about all the things that we have taken for granted today. So let me start with the idea of mobility. Even the flyer for this event mentions mobility. Think about mobility for a while. In our context, especially in when attached to university education, mobility suggests a sort of ratchet effect. That once ratchet is something where you can't turn it back. It moves only one way, right? That's the ratchet. So mechanisms that have ratchet. So if you enter higher education, then that means, particularly in a caste saturated society like ours, it means that then there are a whole host of jobs that you will not do because you have a university education. So mobility is this ratchet thing that we are creating. Imagine the ideal scenario that all universities work perfectly and they create mobility. There is also something called social structure. Everybody can't have mobility because there are lower level jobs to be done. So how will the social system survive? Now, clearly, our system is very, very unequal. What we need, therefore, is to change the remuneration patterns. We need to change the way in which the social product is distributed. We need to change a situation where nurses earn 1/100th of what doctors earn, where carpenters or plumbers get a small fraction of what university teachers earn, and so on, right? So we need a much larger social change for a mobility model to work really, for the universities to really provide this kind of mobility on the scale on which we imagine it. Think also of what will happen. Mobility is not the only issue. It is not entirely an illegitimate desire for a person to wish to maintain their social status, right? That's also there, right? We are also not very happy about downward mobility. So universities must also function. Higher education must also fulfill this function, objectively required function of allowing people to not be mobile, that is to say, at least not downwardly mobile, right? So the link between mobility and higher education, we need to think about it a little more carefully. In the context of the massive expansion that has happened in higher education across the world, what is being called massification now, the scale of it in India is truly staggering. Our number of universities in just the 21st century, that is since 2001, the number of universities has multiplied 3.5 times. Enrollment has multiplied 4 times, and our gross enrollment ratio has doubled. Now, these are really staggering numbers. Expansion of this kind across the world has been possible only at the cost of quality. There is no other way this scale of expansion can go on. So once again, we need to remind ourselves of what some scholars had talked about earlier and think more carefully about the expansion of higher education and how we will manage it in a truly responsible social way. And we need to think not just in terms of making, multiplying elite institutions, which is effectively impossible, but we have to think of a manageable and socially responsible, socially defensible tiering of institutions where serious and real mobility from one level to another is possible. That is simply not possible today. What was possible until, I think, the 1980s in the United States via the community college system, where you entered a 2-year college and later were able to transfer credits and get into 4-year research universities. We need to think more carefully about academic freedom, academic autonomy, and so on. Of course, it's well known that academic freedom and freedom of speech are different things. But what I want to emphasize is that academic freedom does not mean the absence of constraint. It simply specifies the community and the modes in which you are accountable. So an academic is accountable to her or his peers, and we need to think about how to make these forms of accountability more robust, more visible, so that the usual accusation that the usual presupposition that teachers and students who are subsidized by government funds should not be allowed to speak against the very government that is paying for them and become, sort of anti-national, etc., etc. A lot of this, we have heard a lot of this in recent times. So we need to think about how we might shift the image of academic autonomy into a more real, a more thought through version that people will see does not amount to the freedom to say anything or do anything at all. That's not what academic autonomy means. Even though, obviously, all that is being done today is absurd and needs to be fought and protested and so on. We also, I think, need to remember of and to think of the non-academic, or more accurately, the non-scholastic uses of the university. To my mind, one of the most useful things about the university is as a physical space, which makes possible a lot of things that are not possible for a large number of students, and also I think for some teachers as well. So what can we do to protect or revive this space, which is formally or on the surface within the campus of the university, but actually refers to things that happen outside classrooms and so on, because that has been, I think, a very important part of our social transformation in recent times. We need to think also beyond the university. We need to think of how things that we are now taking for granted will happen only in universities can start to happen outside universities. And there are various ways of thinking about it, and particularly in areas like theater, literature, and so on. There are a lot of possibilities. People are already doing a lot. And overall, I think we need to think of the present crisis not only as something that will get solved if a particular government goes away, but as something that is perhaps going to be with us for a long time, and we need to prepare to think about it and to meet it as best as we can. I know this has been very disjointed and scattered, but I'll wait for your questions, and I hope that question and answer session will take the discussion forward. Thank you.
बहुत शुक्रिया Professor Satish. It has been like wonderful to hear you, and how you also very beautifully connected today's context with something which is like 3-4 decades ago. So it's very important to actually look at the present in the context of history as well. So many thanks for that. I would I would be very happy if people can ask questions and unmute, and also like to start their video. And before that, I also want to request everyone if they can like switch on their video for a second, and then we can take a group photo. So जिसके लिए भी whoever it's like possible for, just like switch on your video for some times. We'll take a group photo, and then we can just go back on. And meanwhile, also think about questions. Shweta, can we take the photos like दो group में करके? Thank you. And if anyone have any question, please unmute yourself and then ask. I do have one question in the chat box that also I can take. But अगर बाकी लोगों का है, it would be wonderful to have your questions there. Meanwhile, I can read out this question. This is by Azim to you, Satish ji. He is asking, how do we see the future of public universities with the dumbing down of syllabus and strength, as well as the introduction of a plethora of courses through NEP and the persistent use of artificial intelligence, where students are not learning critical thinking, especially in social sciences? आप म्यूट हैं.
जी.
Acha, okay. So people are not able to unmute themselves. So just see on that, Shivkumar.
Yes, this is a very big issue, and I'm sure those of you who are active teachers are talking about this all the time. The epidemic of AI generated answers, chat GPT, and other more advanced versions of this. I think we have to face this head on and accept that, let us say, some part, I'm not yet sure what that proportion will be, some part of what we teach, particularly in undergraduate classes, can perhaps be done by AI. But we need to point out what AI cannot do and what AI is the ways in which AI can be extremely dangerous. People already know about the dangers of what is being called hallucination, when AI, at your request, creates facts which don't exist. I think there's no way of avoiding this. There's no way that there's no point telling people not to use it. It's more useful to talk about what it can and can't do, and to begin emphasizing in our pedagogy, in our curricula, things that AI cannot do. There are also questions of access, even though we keep being told that everyone now has a smartphone, and so there's no inequality anymore. But it's not only that, so we need to consider that as well. But AI is here to stay. It's not going to go away. And I used to use an analogy with spell check, but I think that is totally off. This is way beyond spell check. And in any case, with spell check, you had to have a word in mind. And only the spelling got fixed by spell check. Here, you don't even have to have an idea. You can offer a topic, and AI will produce pass mark level for very standard questions. It produces pass mark level answers. So yes, it will have to be faced. But my sense is that we should face it head on.
Veena ji, are you able to unmute yourself? I think you are a participant.
May I ask a question?
Please.
Hi, Satish. This is
Hello,
Veena Shatrugna. Hello.
I can't see you.
Yeah, you can see me now, I think. But that doesn't matter.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah. Hi. Satish, I think the present crisis is not partly, to a large extent, due to the fact that the universities allowed spaces for people to protest. Yes, you're right. Spaces for discussion. But the biggest crime, I think, I see as the activism outside the universities force the universities to create courses like the women's studies, Dalit courses, ecology. I mean, you name it. All the activism pushed the university to relook at sociology, medicine, and many, many other subjects. Now, this has created a lot of turbulence, and the present dispensation is obviously, after all, the Hyderabad University suspension of 20 Dalit students wasn't just out of the way. It was what they were able to do in the universities. So whether it was women's studies, whether you know it. Now, what I'm trying to say is maybe this is a moment for us to relook at what are the new areas in which we must just walk in without the permission of the universe, not really challenging them in terms of processions or protests or something like that, but really open up new areas for our own growth, for the growth of our community, to strengthen us to handle today's state of affairs, which is not easy. I am not at all underestimating the present crisis. After all those who were part of the movements did not address the questions of large number of young, semi-literate, non-literate boys and girls, Hindi-speaking belt, who wanted to be part of this nation and were not allowed, whether it was the left movement, women's movement, Dalit movement, you name it. So they had been marginalized, remember. And this new dispensation gives them a space at the high table. So there are these things we haven't addressed, and maybe we have to now take the academia to address some of these questions. This, I don't know whether I'm making sense, but I just wanted to share it. Thanks.
No, thank you. Other comments, questions? I'm sure there is a lot of people have a lot to say.
May I?
Amitabh, please.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for having this lovely conversation. I'm Amitabh Shorkan, an alumnus of JNU Center. My question is for Professor Deshpande. Sir, higher education or public university, philosophically, each has a social purpose. According to your like wrapping up argument, like we're saying that probably a massive restructuring is required, where you are critically pointing out that mobility, both the mobility as well as the very economic function of university in modern times, the jobs are no longer be viable because the model is now almost dysfunctional. So sorry, my background is a bit noisy and messy.
It's all right. I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure others can as well.
Yeah. If this is the situation, and overall, be it in the West or East, say even the current regime will be replaced at some day and all, then perhaps one, if I go by this argument, so then one is that back to the normalcy, where academic sanity and sanctity both can be restored. But again, if I take this argument, what you were saying, then ultimately the public universities will no longer be in the mode of service because of techno-feudalism and many other theories are coming up. So in that way, say critical thinking, public good concept, common good concept, economic development, if these all are becoming more obsolete, then what would be the role of public university in terms of social purpose in the future?
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
that's really what we have to think about. And the accumulated, sort of ideological hegemony of a neoliberal way of thinking, where the function of the state is increasingly to simply help markets function better and make way for markets as much as possible, has led to, across the world, has led to a shrinking of spending on social sector. The exceptions are very, very few, and mostly in Scandinavia and some European countries. Other than that, the whole world has faced a funding issue for higher education. Also, I think we have to remember that over the past 3 decades, this is not a new thing that started just now. The distinction or the difference between public and private universities has been slowly being eroded. So at one end, IIMs and IITs now charge quite significant fees. They're comparable to private institutions, except that there is no capitation fee. And many universities, particularly regional universities, have what are called self-financing courses, self-financing faculties, and so on. So on the other hand, what were thought of particularly, and that has been an aspect of the American crisis that has really, I didn't know about and that shocked me, is the large amounts of public money involved in private universities. Because of what Mr. Trump is doing to the famous universities of America, we suddenly discover that there are billions of dollars of federal money going into these so-called private institutions. So we have always had a situation where higher education has been the sort of thing where the public-private distinction has been more blurred than we might have thought. having said that, it's true that we need to, as you're saying, we need to reaffirm within this changing context, things that I pointed to already, that are larger than just education. We need to reaffirm the social mission of the public university. And more importantly, we have to force our governments to stand behind that commitment. There is no other way around that, because it is not something that it's a classic case of market failure. Or at least where the market functions, it functions in a very distorted way. That much is clear.
So then, in that sense, I mean, then the private university will also face wrath of the
Yes.
overall disorder.
Yes. And you see the other part of things that I didn't talk about, although I don't know enough about this, even in STEM fields, the kind of links between university and industry now are such that control over even basic research, a large part of that is through industry. So even what is happening in public universities is often driven by research programs that are, I'm talking about the instrumental part of higher education, where, particularly in the science and technology fields, where basic research is required, but is fixed costs that industry does not want to incur, and therefore enters into, what are euphemistically called PPP, public-private partnership deals. And this is being promoted in a very big way, actually, including by public universities. You're asked, what are your, how much money you're bringing in by way of such collaborations. So the idea of a, a pure public university, I think is not viable anymore. But this doesn't mean that everything is the same and, there's nothing to do. But we have to recognize a shift in the larger economic climate, just as we have to recognize a shift in popular ideas about liberal education.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Shweta, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I think Lalita raised her hand first.
Lalita, please. मैंने देखा नहीं. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Professor Deshpande, and thanks to Lara as well. I just wanted to, just a quick introduction. I am really happy after a long time to attend a discussion, even though it's online. And I'm working on academic freedom and no platforming, thinking, grappling with the idea of the role of university and so on. So it was really, I don't know, heartfelt to just listen to the both of you. And I could see how the concerns that Lara has also very nicely raised. And I could see the connections that one can make with whatever Professor Deshpande had also said. Now, there are two things that I just wanted to bring in here, so that you, both of you, would probably like to comment on that. First is that, and I'm glad that you mentioned the role of the academia to make its presence more popular and to probably involve, or rather to have more engagement with the society in terms of not justifying their role of knowledge production and dissemination, but also just be more open, and in terms of to have an open communication with the society. Now, with that concern in mind, I grapple with the idea of these three concepts of: one, accountability to society; the second, what is the responsibility vis-a-vis? So, because you mentioned also that you there is a demand to cater to the popular opinion or the popular ideology in the society. So, one is to what extent the academia should be accountable to the society. The second is whether there is that kind of responsibility to cater to that popular ideology or views. Finally, when we are thinking about those two ways of interacting with the society at large, how do we think about, and these are the questions that I'm obviously, thinking about for a few months now. So how do you, I see that we as in the academia, there's this the gap which we see how you also connected the previous decades and the movements and what was happening on university campuses. Even, till I think a few years back, a lot of things, even there was a lot of struggle, but we were also able to at least fight openly for the rights of the students. Now, there has been that disconnect of the academic community from the society. If we just look at whatever instances Professor Deshpande has mentioned, and also the current context, the cases that Lara has spoken about. Now, that disconnect from the society and that justification or the need for the academia to communicate again with the larger society. Those are the two aspects which are connected, yet these are not easy things to think about. So I think I'll stop there. It's quite messy. I'm sorry for that, but
No. It is messy. It's messy. In fact, I mean, we are not entirely responsible for the mess. I think this is a more complicated idea than we normally allow it to be. When we say that universities should not be ivory towers, they should reflect society and so on. In times like this, I mean, this is like, the 1930s, when a fascist or proto-fascist moment arrives, in what Bertolt Brecht, famously said, what do you do if the people are wrong? Right? There are situations where, for whatever historical reasons, the mass feeling is very regressive. And therefore, it should not be a formulaic thing. That's why I think universities, to some extent, need to insulate themselves from society. There are many times, the most important thing universities can do is to go against what are the dominant beliefs in society, not be one with the masses, sort of way of looking at things. The question is, how do you enact, or how do you perform this role? There we have, I'm sure there is, we can do a lot better than what we have been doing. So I don't think it is legitimate necessarily to think that, universities should think like the people. No, many times they should oppose what people are, what is the dominant ideology of the moment. The question is, how do you do it? And how do you do it so it does not look like, so it is effective, and doing it from on high, from above, obviously, it does not work. So you have to think of, you have to think of more effective ways. But I do think the university needs to insulate itself from society without becoming thereby insensitive to society. That's not what I mean. But the common man, there should be a difference between the way the so-called common man or common woman thinks and what a university student thinks like. I think that is the job of the university, to allow a person who would otherwise have thought like the common man to think differently. And our claim should be, and we should try to demonstrate this, that this way of thinking is for some explainable reason better.
Lara, what do you want to go now?
Yeah. No, so the thing is that I think.
Yes, I was going to ask you
Satish
something, but anyway, yeah.
No, I definitely agree with what Satish is saying, and also I understand where you come from, Lalita, when you say that. I mean, I don't think any of us would dispute that we cannot, think in the same. We cannot have the same, majoritarian way of thinking. And that's not what the university space is for. The university space is supposed to, have an independent, free, space to think differently from what we are seeing right now as the majoritarian imposition. And there can be no dispute to that. But one of the things I feel when we talk about the academia, and I probably should have raised it in the first part, but I wanted to stick to the practical issues when I was speaking, because I know Satish was coming in later. But one of the major, things that when we talk about the academic space is, what is this academic space? This academic space mainly consists of, and it is dominated by, or rather controlled by, the upper caste, those who are pretty much ideologically linked with the majoritarian government that we're seeing right now. The difference that was there, okay, and I think there was that difference, that independence was there, that free space was there earlier. I was talking about how the academic space looks today, but the difference that was there earlier was that, it was always upper caste dominated. And maybe to some extent that demography changed probably within the students, but I don't see how it changed within the teaching professionals or the professors. We don't see as many professors who are Dalits or who are who are from marginalized communities, Adivasis, who are part of the teaching class within the university space. But one of the things that we must, I feel we tend to, I think it's very important that we keep in mind is that we are talking about a very Brahminical education system that has continued. And we're talking about a space which has been dominated by, people who are upper caste. And when we see such kind of attacks, we do have many who have stood up and who have raised their voices. But at the same time, there are also those who are, who have been conveniently, sort of bought over or, sided with this government when the opportunity arose. And that goes to the root of the entire education system in India. And that's where it differs, I feel, in many ways. There are many parallels we can draw in terms of the, race bias that we see in America and all of that. But the entire caste domination that we see within the university space is something that is intensified within this government, which is which has been propagating this Brahminical, patriarchal, a very authoritarian structure. So this structural issue that we see within the education system, I don't think, except for, students who have been questioning it and who have been trying to change it and have been in the forefront, raising these issues. I think these structural issues are something that we don't see the academic community as a collective raise. And there I feel that there is a big lacuna. And I keep coming back to, more of the actionable issues, because I am in courts, I am seeing, I feel that when we talk about things like, where is the public education system heading, or where are the public universities heading, and what's behind it, there are many things that we will not be able to control in these issues. We may want things to change, but there is no political will or intention today. Today, the government has clamped down on the university space, and as much as academics and, good thinking, people will want to, bring in change or resist it, it's not as easy to do it, because we're seeing changes that are taking place at a policy level. We've seen this happen not just in the education space, but we've seen this in environment. I'm an environmental lawyer. We have seen a spate of environmental policy dilutions that have come in. And, there is a complete shift in policy that we're seeing under this government. So this is happening in all of the areas. And the policy is, ideologically motivated. It is motivated towards, this whole, free market, lack of economic direction that, this government is looking at. So I feel that if we want to really look at what the academics role can be, or how we, we have to go to the root of the issues to look at how we can challenge many of these dynamics, but also how do we build a resistance that is collective and that, that actually stands with the students, stands with those who have been opposing, this kind of hegemonical system within the public education space or within the education space. And there I feel we do have a lot to work on. That is a space that we can still work on, that we have, that we need to, more forcefully work on.
We were supposed to finish at 7:30, 7:40. So I would want to take a last round of questions. There is Prerna, there is Shweta, and there is Prachin. So we'll have all of these questions together. And then we can just move towards the end of it. Also, although it's such a fantastic discussion that we would want to keep having for hours and hours. So Prerna, you can go now.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful talk, Lara and Professor Deshpande. I'm a PhD scholar at Ambedkar University, and not a question, but a very small addition to the discussion is, and it connects to both your comments just now. One, how the university comes as a space that is apart from the public space, and also Lara's comment on how the state is entering the universities and trying to clamp down. One thing that I, as a political activist, student activist on campus, have also seen is the hyper documentation of events. So what is happening nowadays is, while these movements earlier, the student movements were also built along with the workers and the non-teaching staff and the teaching staff, what is happening now is that you see guards being pushed by the administration to document all of these different events. They have their cameras on at all instances, they document you. And this started off when the Azadi slogans came out and doctored videos came out, but now it has become hyper documented in those senses. I, in fact, on a daily basis, almost get a call from IB officers who are posted on campus. They, in fact, leave voicemails on my phone saying ki, okay, I have gotten the poster from social media or some WhatsApp group for this event of different organizations. What is happening? Tell me. So all of this presence really make the state is making the university and dragging it to the public for it to get, come forth for, discussion and whatever is happening in the universities, whatever we are happening. And it connects to Lara's point about these political organizations not being recognized, protest spaces being shrinking, or events not being allowed to happen. Just wanted to add that also to the discussion in terms of how the surveillance and the state is also entering in this manner, which is subtle, but it also creates fear amongst all students who get engaged. A lot of students in our university, which is a very small state university, panic and fear from even coming on the road to go against. I mean, barricading has turned into iron gates on a small campus, and people are shying away or fear coming out and opposing the administration. Thank you for giving me space. Thank you.
Thank you, Prerna. Lara, we'll just take all the questions together so we can move towards the end. Thank you. Shweta and Prachin. Prachin has posted his question into the chat box. It will be grateful if he can unmute himself and ask. Shweta, you can go meanwhile.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, Professor Deshpande and Lara. This was very interesting to hear. And also, I must very frankly admit, we are all a big group of alumni association members sitting here. And the very idea of having this kind of a conversation was, frankly, to acknowledge our own fears. Because, let's not pretend, because JNU has been we all know it's been under attack, and not just JNU, so many universities, public, private, right? So it's like a scary situation. So not for a second, at least amongst us alumni association, we are pretending that we are okay. And we are not even pretending that we have the means or the tools to handle this kind of, situation where power dynamics are real. students are scared to talk back to teachers, are scared to talk back to the institutions and the power that they hold over everybody. So then, and that exists within the larger societal setup. So in that scenario, particularly related to the Dashera celebrations on campus few months ago, some instances of aggression and violence were happening that time, and students approached us saying that, let's discuss this, have a webinar, give a statement, and so on. But we, again, I mean, it was not easy at all, even for us, right? We are the public health department, and we were kind of discussing all this amongst us, and we weren't agreeing on much. But again, we acknowledge our fear and our own insecurity as in different capacities. Like, I'm not a student presently, but I'm just saying that I was looking for some courage and some hope and some, how do we flex that muscle, how we build on that courage, those networks. I mean, we're all afraid to lose our degrees, we're afraid to lose our jobs, and that's real. And for those of us who are some of us are from the marginalized communities, I mean, the stakes are even higher and the abuse is greater. So then, I mean, what are our takeaways from this? Because I mean, I don't know. I'm saddened. I'm more saddened now at the end of this webinar. So I'm just speaking very candidly with Lara and Deshpande ji, and I really want to hear something, some hope, some courage. I don't know. What are our takeaways? I mean, I'm just being very blunt. Sorry.
प्राची, आप है यहाँ? Or should I read out your question?
Yeah, exactly.
Hello? Okay, I can read out his question. He's saying that, are we holding to the university as an institution that have essentially be elite historically in very many ways and has not served the needs of masses? I wonder if disruption of this would unfold new possibilities, new ways and organizations of learning and teaching. Big industries no more dependent on university for human resource. They have their own training programs. Is it possible to have alternative modes, organizing and mechanisms of learning and education which are reflective of the kind of politics and social progress we intend to see? Are any such experiment which were the examination? Are we defending? And he's saying that, asking, are we defending university just because we have personal stakes in the university? Is there any more questions, or should we just think these are the last question and we can move towards the end of it? Okay, I'm assuming there are no questions.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry to disturb you, but now only I got that confidence to ask the question. So sorry for that. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and Lara ma'am and Satish sir, not only for giving such wonderful session, but also I feel like we are having some people to give us some solidarity and give confidence while doing all this protest. And thank you for that. I'm a research scholar from Pondicherry University, and I have joined in the Center for Women's Studies because after my chemistry degree, because I know that the pedagogy they are following is different, their atmosphere will be different. But after that, once I have completed my PG and joined here for PhD, the things started to get different, and then I slowly came to understand that the academic space inside the university itself is not much, itself is very much controlling us. And the one thing I would like to mention here is one very bad thing about the issues of research scholars is there is no university stipend is increasing after 2011. Like it's 8,000 since 2012, and more than 11 years it is not increasing, while JRF is getting increased for before 2-3 years. Say how the people like me who are solely breadwinners of the family, if they are getting university stipend, how they can actually live with those 8,000 rupees. And when I'm going for protest and all, the teachers who are teaching us about the feminism, activism and all, even complaining and protesting is a part of feminist pedagogy. They are forgetting that, and they are asking us to sit in 5 class and studying. So there are forces of forcing to paper publishing, and sexual harassment is happening with research supervisor and scholar. So in this scenario, it is so hard for a research scholars to do the exact research. So I just wanted to point out this. Thank you.
Thanks, Sneha. I'll request Lara and then Satish ji to kind of like towards answering that and towards reaching towards a conclusion.
I think it's good to hear from the students, because things are really difficult within campuses, and they just keep getting worse now. So I think the questions are not easy. But going to the first, I think, comment that was made on the surveillance within campuses, I had mentioned it. Yet at the same time, I think one of the most important factors and we need to counter this, and we have been countering it in cases that have taken place with students, is that this surveillance is not just to monitor the activities of the students in order to start any kind of action against them, but the surveillance is with the intent to vilify the student community. And that is something that we have to counter very, very strongly. And there are ways of doing that. We have done it in many of our cases, because most of the time, if we see the surveillance that takes place, whether it is of protests or meetings or any kind of in-campus activity, even outside campus, like I said, of the case where somebody who went and protested in Delhi was suspended. So you have situations like this coming up all the time. It also accompanies a very strong vilification campaign, where the institute comes out with a press release where they vilify the student as such and such. There are, of course, the media carries it, and then you have the government agencies, sometimes even the police giving statements on it. So it is not just about surveilling, but it is about trying to show that a particular student association or a particular politically minded student association or a particular student, is anti-national or is standing up against the government, and trying to show them as wasting taxpayers' money, as not behaving like a student and not deserving of fellowship or scholarship or whatever student entitlements they have. So this is also a larger agenda to show students from particular universities where the free speech existed, at some point, or where the spaces existed, as being, misusing of those spaces, and to try and create a narrative that such kind of students are like this, right? It is in order to create this political bias, and it is in order to create this narrative in the eyes of the public. And to a great extent, we saw that happen in some of the earlier cases that we saw that happen in the JNU case in 2016, where there was this whole huge vilification campaign that had been run by the media. And more particularly, we saw how Umar was attacked during that process, where his Muslim identity had been targeted. And in order to show, then also there were lots of different incidents that took place after that, where JNU was shown as a daru adda, where it was shown as where it was shown as a sex adda, or whatever kinds of different narratives that they had tried to peddle. So it's not, and this is happening throughout. We see that happening from university after university, right? So this is not a simple matter of just surveillance, but it is a matter of vilifying the student community, of vilifying a particular kind of protest, vilifying a cause, vilifying a politics. Now, one thing that will never work in such a scenario is keeping quiet. It is very important for our counter to be out. It is very important positively to communicate with the public. Some student organizations do that. They communicate with the public. They have their own social media handles. They put out things in public. But otherwise, if we see, the university space lives in a cocoon, and the time to cocoon has gone. Because the fight that is taking place in the public domain. So the more you can resist it, the more you bring out your own truth. It is very important that you talk your own story and that all of us have the platform to do it. And so cocooning is no longer an option anymore. We can be insulated from the majoritarian politics, but we cannot be insulated from the public. We cannot. Okay, our thought needs to spread far and wide. Okay, and the demeanor and the constitutional values that we uphold, right? So all of this needs to spread far and wide, and most importantly, our story needs to spread far and wide, especially if there are false or fake propaganda vilification campaigns that are being held that are being run against us. And many times we also see that the right wing forces join. So you have right wing very, very active on social media. You have the IT cell, you have Shankar Nad, Op India. All of them will take it up and they will put up a complete, a sorry picture of the student community or claim that they are anti-national or terrorist or Maowadi or whatever they want to, right? But there has to be a counter. And I think that's one part. So I was just wanted to point out that surveillance is not innocent. And it's not something that we can take lightly. Second thing, I think what Shweta said about specifically about, what can we do and what are our takeaways? I don't think I am, I wouldn't be disappointed at the end of the discussion. We need to have a lot more discussions because these are things that we need to brainstorm. All right, I don't have any answer and I don't claim to have any answer. No one does. But one thing I have seen is that students are resisting and they're resisting big time. And that we as civil society, I'm not a student anymore. And I do my activism. I'm in PUCL. I'm a lawyer. I do my human rights advocacy. Wherever we can, we have to provide the support that we can to the student community, to the academia in general, in order to continue to resist and continue to fight. And we have to fight alongside them. And I think as alumni have played a vital role. I have seen that happen through so many of the cases that I have represented. I represent students quite often. I take up all their cases, especially when they are, facing action from the state or from the management because of their political work. And one thing and for their protest. And one thing I can say is that, many times I have seen alumni come out, issue statements in support, offer support to some of the students who are facing direct action. And this role is very vital. And while I do get that it is very difficult, I'll tell you a very recent case just this year where some alumni received notices saying that their degree will be revoked. Okay. And obviously, it so far, it cannot stand in law. It cannot stand in law. And they were defended. We replied to those notices and it was defended. But at the same time, they're not going to stop making those attacks. Writing to the workplaces, you never know in whatever ways that they can do it. But at the same time, I think collectivity does bring some kind of strength. And the more we are able to, and also it will help us, not seed spaces. Because if we seed the space, it's going to be very difficult for us to get it again. So we cannot allow that space to be seeded. Yes, there is a loss of space, but whatever it is, we need to recapture it or we need to protect it. And that is a very important role that all of us play. And not just alumni today, it's not just about degree revocation. Today, if any activist supports a cause, they also get criminal cases against them. If an activist goes and joins a student protest, even they will have criminal cases against them. Today, defenders are at risk. So we have to, be part of the battle rather than not. And especially, I feel, especially because we have our stakes are involved, and all of us for that matter, the future. And especially for those coming from the vulnerable groups, for those of us who come from, groups that are threatened, we know that we are at direct risk. So I think these things do make I'm hopeful because I can see the resistance still. And we are resisting and we will resist. And how long will this continue? Okay, people are going to question and people more and more as the rights go. The only question is we have to keep the fight on and hope that we'll be able to get more people motivated to join. I think that's the whole thing. I hope I'm not sermonizing. I did sound like I'm sermonizing, but I feel it's too early to lose hope. The question of I'm not the right person to answer this very this very difficult question that has been put on chat on seeding on coming up with an alternative way. I feel that many of us who have come from spaces where my father was a first generation learner, and many of us may, or some of you may, come from spaces where education has not been very easy, and the formality of the process is what got us into the education system. And so I am personally not very clear on how alternative systems work. Alternative systems do work if you are going to be in the informal space. But as soon as you enter the formal workspace, it is very difficult to make them work. And today, formality is coming from registration, licenses, everything the government controls. So again, the question of how do we have these alternative spaces? I'm sure there will be space for these alternative spaces, but I don't really know who they will benefit. Will they benefit those coming from marginalized communities, or who have found it so difficult to even get formal education, and even then being in formal education has been tough? So these questions, according to me, are a little difficult. But we do need to expand the education space, and we do need to have more of education available outside the university space as well. I agree with that. If that is one of the questions that is being raised, I completely agree with that. There were very rich study circles. There were very rich spaces to go and educate ourselves beyond our public university space. I came from a state college where we did not have the best education system that we've seen in some of the public universities. I'm not a public university person. I came from a state college. But at the same time, even within that, there were other spaces that one could go to where we could get, and they were not coaching classes, but there were other spaces that we could go to where we could, get, education. And I think that is definitely necessary. We need to bolster that because the syllabus is being changed. There is a saffronization taking place. The history is being manipulated. We are seeing that facts are being manipulated. And at this point of time, the more and more we are able to create other spaces for the information to get out, I think it's going to only be helpful. And how do we make it accessible to everyone? How do we look at more of open source? How do we look at more of using technology? We know that technology is there's a whole huge issue of digital inequality. How do we make more material accessible? So I think all of these things, there are things that we can work on, and I feel that they are necessary. And coming finally to the Pondicherry University, Sneha was speaking about the situation in Pondicherry University, and I'm really sorry that you're going through such a tough time. But we are seeing that also with research scholars, also with research assistants, or also with professors or teachers within the university space. We are seeing that there has been not just this reduction of stipends, but there has been a complete way of controlling. It's a whole method to control and to silence that is being used in order to get the teaching community or those who are dependent on resources within the university space completely silenced. And we've seen that with the students. The students who've been under attack, the first thing that happens is their fellowships are stopped. That's the first thing. They just stop getting their fellowships, right? As soon as they're suspended, their fellowships are stopped. Then you have to go and fight the battle to get the to get the fellowships back again. So all of these things that we are seeing are methods to control, and it is very difficult to fight within that space. And I think that is why we cannot, if these situations happen, we need to be able to provide a supportive network to challenge them. We cannot let them go unanswered. If we know something wrong is happening, we should be able to challenge them. And I'm not saying courts are the most friendly place to go, but we cannot, we have to be able to build a supportive network that is able to challenge it at every stage. we cannot accept the fact, I feel, that, these resources are being used as a means to control. And we will have to find and devise new ways to do that. Like I said, I don't have all the answers today, and I completely understand the situation and how difficult it is within the campus space to speak up. But let's look at how we can also, fight it in a more constructive way. Yeah.
Thanks, Lara. I'll request Satish ji to be,
very
be a
briefly.
little brief. Sorry.
Yes, I understand. So I just want to say that I've spent almost my entire adult life in universities, and I can't begin to tell you how I feel today when I see what is happening across the world to universities. There is something very clarifying about moments like this, as many of you have said. On the one hand, it could be a very complicated institution if you think about it in research terms. But on the other hand, if you think about it as part of your everyday life, it's very simple. You have to fight. And that's what people are saying. I agree entirely. My only suggestion is that we try to multiply the forms of protest as much as possible. Think of new forms. Obviously, old forms you have to continue, but think of broadening these forms as much as possible. And one thing that I have myself been doing is, might sound very strange to you, is that I've been conducting workshops on reading and writing. And I think that is also that kind of, from there to straight out protests, is a full spectrum that we need to work with. And we do need more events like this, also for solidarity, for feeling that we are together with others, we are not alone. So thank you very much for having this event and for listening to us.
बहुत शुक्रिया सतीश जी. I'll just quickly share 2-3 things that have been going on in my mind. Lara spoke on the protest in the resident side, and Satish ji spoke about the entire philosophy and context and relevance of public university. I did my PhD on the experience and stories and narratives of the students. These are the students who are not the protesters. These are the students who are mostly first generation, coming from a village to a city like Allahabad, which is still not a metro city, and coming with aspirations, coming with hope. So the mobility context which Satish has talked about is very important, because if you don't have, so in a way that what I feel with whatever is going on, people are still putting faith in education. And for a lot of people, including someone like Lara, someone like me, many of us, or many of the people who are coming, if there was no public education, they were not there. So it is, in a way, even if they are not going for a protest, right? What I find out, at least it's changing something in them. They will not be the same person they were before they came to these educational institutions. Whether it is sitting in the classrooms, whether it is sitting in the college park, talking to people from different caste or different religion, different community. So there is a beauty to public education system and public universities. That is something that I was thinking about when I was listening to all of it. Many thanks, and many thanks to all these people who have been with us since 6 o'clock, and I know it's too late. So many thanks for all of you to stay back till now. Many thanks to Lara. Wonderful to hear all of that, and really like the way she said it. Like it felt like, okay, we are listening to a bhashan that's saying, okay, we need to do something. We can't lose hope. So that's wonderful for that. Thank you for that energy, bringing that energy to the group. Satish ji, of course, cannot thank you enough for bringing your thoughts, inputs, and also solidarities. And along with that, I also want to thank a webinar group member who has been working constantly for many weeks or months, including Supriya, Anusha, Ranveer, Professor Rama Baru, and special thanks to Shweta and Vijaya, and as well as two people who have been very instrumental for us to run this webinar through technicalities, Sri Kumar and Aryan, and also Dr. Indranil for providing us his Zoom. So many thanks, and I lot is going on in my hand to be able to bind it all together. So I think that's a good moment. That's a idea of good webinar when you don't want to stop and you actually is constantly thinking. So बहुत शुक्रिया and we'll update all of you for our next webinars and hope to see you very soon. Bye.